April 16th, 1945. A village somewhere west of the Elbe River. The world is made of mud and noise. For 20-year-old Hanna Vogel, a Nachrichtenhelferin in the Wehrmacht, it has been this way for weeks. The air, thick with the smell of damp earth and cordite, vibrates with a constant guttural rumble. It's a sound that has crawled west across Germany with the inexorable advance of the Allies. It's the sound of the end. She huddles in the cellar of a shattered farmhouse, the stone walls sweating with condensation. Above, the staccato chatter of an MG-42 is answered by the heavier, rhythmic thumping of an American Browning .50 caliber. Each burst from the Browning sends a shower of dust and mortar down from the ceiling joists. Her headset is silent. The last coherent signal she relayed was 3 hours ago, a frantic, garbled message from a panzer unit that was being systematically dismantled a kilometer down the road. Now there is only static, an electronic ghost screaming into the void. Her commander, a gaunt, hollow-eyed Oberleutnant with a tremor in his hand, stares at the cellar door as if he can see through the thick oak to the American armor that is surely grinding its way through the village square. There are only 6 of them left in the signals detachment. 2 are wounded. The youngest, a girl named Lainey, not yet 18, is curled in a corner, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Hanna clutches her Mauser Kar 98K, the wooden stock smooth and cold against her cheek. She is not a frontline soldier, not truly. She was trained to connect wires, decipher code, and route communications. But in the death throes of the Third Reich, everyone with a uniform is a soldier. The party officials who visited their training camp had been very clear about what capture meant, especially for a woman. The stories were legion, whispered in barracks and printed in stark, terrifying pamphlets. The Americans, they were told, were gangsters and degenerates. The British, vengeful colonial masters. But the tales of the Soviets were the stuff of nightmares. Yet even in the West, the propaganda painted a brutal picture. They would be used, violated, and discarded. Dr. Goebbels' voice, crackling over the radio, had promised that surrender was a fate worse than death. A betrayal of the blood, a stain on German honor. He spoke of torture, of re-education camps where they would be systematically broken, their German spirit scoured from their souls. A tremendous crash overhead shakes the entire farmhouse. A shell has struck the roof, and the groan of splintering timber is followed by the horrifying sound of the second story collapsing. Lainey screams, a raw, sharp sound that is quickly swallowed by the chaos. The Oberleutnant shouts, his voice cracking, "It's over! We're finished!" He scrambles for the cellar door, fumbling with the latch. Hanna's heart hammers against her ribs. No, not surrender. The images flash through her mind. Leering faces, rough hands tearing at her uniform, the cold steel of a knife, the laughter. She has seen the posters of the barbaric, subhuman armies. She knows what they do. The door bursts open, not to the gray, smoky daylight, but to the silhouettes of 2 broad-shouldered men. They are huge, larger than life, framed by the chaos outside. They wear the unfamiliar helmet of the U.S. Army. One of them holds a Thompson submachine gun, its barrel glinting. A voice, rough and alien, barks a command in English. "Hands up! Get your hands up, now!" Hanna doesn't understand the words, but the meaning is universal. Slowly, her fingers uncurl from her rifle. She lets it clatter to the stone floor. The Oberleutnant is already raising his hands, his face a mask of pale defeat. One by one, they follow. The American soldiers herd them out of the cellar and into the blinding, chaotic light. The village is a ruin. Smoke billows from every structure. An M4 Sherman tank sits idling in the street. its long 76mm gun pointed down the road, its engine a deep, menacing growl. GIs from the 29th Infantry Division move with practiced ease, clearing buildings, their faces smeared with grime and exhaustion. They barely glance at the small group of captured Germans. Hannah keeps her eyes fixed on the muddy ground, her entire body rigid with terror. She feels a hand on her arm, rough but not violent, guiding her towards a wall with the others. She flinches, expecting a blow, but it doesn't come. A young GI, his face covered in freckles, frisks her with a detached, almost bored professionalism. He removes the small P-38 pistol from her belt holster and tosses it onto a pile of confiscated weapons. She risks a glance at his face. He looks no older than she is. There is no demonic leer, no sadistic glint in his eyes. There is only a profound weariness. He meets her gaze for a fraction of a second, and then looks away, as if embarrassed. This small human moment is more disorienting than the violence she had braced herself for. The propaganda had given her a script for this moment, a script of heroic defiance or brutal martyrdom. It had not prepared her for this strange, empty feeling, this cold, bureaucratic processing of defeat. They are lined up and marched to the back of a canvas-covered GMC truck. The male soldiers are separated, shoved towards a different vehicle. It is just Hannah, Leni, and another woman, a medic, who are told to climb into the back. The tailgate slams shut with a deafening clang, plunging them into a suffocating, swaying darkness. The truck lurches into motion, its engine roaring. Hannah presses herself into the corner, the smell of diesel and damp canvas filling her nostrils, listening to Leni's ragged breathing beside her. The stories, the warnings, the terrifying promises of the party, they echo in the darkness. The journey has begun, and she is certain it is a journey to hell. The darkness inside the truck is a breeding ground for fear. Every jolt and sway is a prelude to some imagined horror. The three women huddle together, a small island of shared terror in the rumbling void. Leni, the young auxiliary, has fallen into a state of shock, her breathing shallow, her eyes wide and unseeing in the gloom. The medic, a woman in her 30s named Ilsa with a stoic, weary face, occasionally mutters a few words of reassurance that sound hollow even to herself. Hannah remains silent, her mind a whirlwind of propaganda reels. She pictures interrogation rooms, bright lights, cruel men asking questions she can't answer. She imagines the camps she's heard whispers of. Not the ones for Jews and political prisoners, but the ones for captured soldiers, where starvation and beatings are a daily routine. After what feels like an eternity, the truck slows, its gears grinding. The air brake hisses, and they come to a halt. There are muffled shouts in English from outside. The canvas flap is thrown back, and blinding daylight pours in. "Raus, schnell!" a voice yells. It's a German voice, strangely accented. A prisoner, already put to work. Hannah scrambles out, her legs stiff, her eyes struggling to adjust. What she sees is a vision of apocalypse. They are in a vast, open field, churned to a sea of mud by thousands of boots and the tracks of heavy vehicles. Barbed wire fences stretch in every direction, disappearing into a gray, drizzling mist. Inside the wire, there are no barracks, no buildings, only a dense, undulating mass of humanity. Tens of thousands of men in field gray uniforms, standing, sitting, or lying in the mud. This is a Rheinwiesenlager, a Rhine meadow camp, a temporary holding pen for the tidal wave of German soldiers surrendering as the Reich crumbles. The sheer scale of the defeat is staggering. It's a silent, sprawling monument to a lost war.
The women are immediately separated, led by an American MP towards a smaller, segregated enclosure. The MP, a corporal with a thick neck and a cud of chewing tobacco in his cheek, doesn't speak. He just points with his M1 carbine. As they are marched past the teeming enclosures of male prisoners, Hannah feels 1,000 pairs of eyes on her. The faces are gaunt, bearded, and etched with a profound hopelessness. There are no defiant glares, no shouts of encouragement. There is only the vacant stare of the utterly defeated. The air smells of mud, unwashed bodies, and despair. Their own enclosure is small, holding perhaps 200 other women. Nurses, signals operators, anti-aircraft auxiliaries, administrative staff. A cross-section of the Wehrmacht Helferinnen in Corps. Some look defiant, their chins held high. Others weep openly. Most, like Hannah, wear a mask of numb apprehension. The processing is methodical, impersonal. They are lined up. A female U.S. Army officer from the WWII, Women's Army Corps, supervises, a clipboard in her hand, her expression stern but professional. One by one, they are called forward to a folding table, where a GI records their name, rank, and unit. He butchers the German pronunciation. When it's Hannah's turn, she speaks her details in a monotone. The soldier types them onto a form with 2 fingers. No questions about troop movements, no threats, no interrogation. They are given a blanket, a tin cup, and a mess kit. The blanket is rough, smelling of disinfectant. The efficiency of it all is unnerving. It feels less like the capture of enemy combatants and more like the processing of livestock. This cold indifference is a different kind of cruelty than the one she was prepared for. The physical blow she expected never lands, but a psychological one strikes deep. They are no longer soldiers of a proud army. They are items on a list, numbers on a page. Later that afternoon, a water truck arrives, and a queue forms instantly. Then, a field kitchen on wheels dispenses their first meal as prisoners. A ladle of a thick, nondescript stew is slapped into Hannah's mess kit, along with a hard biscuit and a cup of something hot that smells vaguely of coffee. She finds a relatively dry patch of ground and sits, her back against a fence post. She watches the other women. A group of nurses has started a hymn, their voices thin and reedy against the vast, miserable landscape.
An older woman with the rank of Stabshelferin stares blankly at the barbed wire, her food untouched. Hannah takes a tentative bite of the stew. It's bland, watery, but warm. It's food. She forces herself to eat, chewing the hard biscuit slowly. She looks at the American guards patrolling the perimeter. They walk their posts with a monotonous rhythm, rifles slung over their shoulders. They look bored, cold, and tired. They look like they want to be anywhere else but here. They look human. Suddenly, a commotion erupts nearby. A young flock helferin, her face streaked with tears and mud, begins to scream. She thrashes wildly, clawing at her own face, shrieking about her family in Dresden, about the fire, the bombs. 2 of her friends try to restrain her, but she is consumed by a hysterical grief. Hannah's breath catches in her throat. This is it. Now they will see the American brutality. The guards will rush in, clubs swinging, to silence the disturbance. An MP, the same corporal from before, jogs over. He stops a few feet away, his hand resting on the stock of his carbine. The screaming girl collapses into a heap, her body racked with sobs. The corporal watches her for a long moment. He says something to a nearby guard, who nods and walks away. The MP doesn't move closer. He doesn't shout. He just stands there, a silent, awkward sentinel. A few minutes later, the other guard returns with an American Army medic, a woman. She carries a small medical bag. She kneels beside the hysterical girl, speaking to her in a low, calm voice, using simple, broken German. She offers the girl a sip of water from her own canteen. Slowly, the girl's sobs subside into ragged gasps. The medic helps her to her feet and leads her gently towards a tent at the edge of the enclosure. Hannah watches the entire exchange, her mind struggling to process what she has just seen. There was no violence, no cruelty. There was procedure. There was a dispassionate, almost gentle handling of a crisis. This small act of calculated mercy is more unsettling than any act of savagery could have been. It doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't compute. Her fear begins to curdle into a profound and terrifying confusion. If the propaganda was wrong about this, what else was it wrong about? The days in the Rheinwiesenlager blur into a monotonous cycle of mud, rain, and waiting. After 2 weeks, a rumor ripples through the women's enclosure. They are being moved. The anxiety returns, sharp and sudden. Is this the real beginning? Are they being transported to a permanent camp in America, or worse, handed over to the Russians? The questions are whispered in hushed, frantic tones around smoky fires fueled by damp twigs. The move comes without warning. One morning, they are roused before dawn, herded onto another convoy of GMC trucks, and driven for hours through the scarred German countryside. They pass ruined cities where hollowed-out buildings stand like skeletal sentinels against the sky. They see columns of refugees pushing carts piled high with their worldly possessions, their faces gray with exhaustion. The sheer, overwhelming totality of the defeat is on full display. This is the Germany they fought to protect. Their destination is not some desolate camp in a foreign land, but a former German army base near Attichy, France, now designated POW Camp 21. Compared to the Rhine meadow, it is a paradise. There are wooden barracks with bunk beds and straw-filled mattresses. There are latrines, washhouses with cold running water, and a central mess hall. The barbed wire is still there, tall and imposing, and the watchtowers are manned by American soldiers, but for the first time in weeks, they have a roof over their heads. A new routine quickly establishes itself, one defined not by terror, but by a soul-crushing boredom. Roll call at 0600 hours. A breakfast of watery porridge and bitter coffee. Then work details. Hannah is assigned to the camp laundry, a vast, steamy building filled with industrial washing machines and mangles. For 8 hours a day, she sorts and washes endless piles of American Army uniforms, the olive-drab fabric heavy and coarse in her hands. The work is physically demanding, but mentally numbing. It leaves too much time to think. The women in her barrack form a small, fragile society. There is Greta, a staunch party loyalist from Hamburg, whose father was a local Gauleiter. She refuses to believe the war is truly over. The Führer has a secret weapon, she insists, her eyes burning with a feverish intensity. These Americans are fools. They think they've won, but they are just waiting for the final blow. Most of the others ignore her, but her fanaticism is a constant, unsettling presence. There is also Frau Schmidt, a widow in her 40s, who served as a civilian administrator for the Luftwaffe. She is pragmatic and cynical. "Secret weapons," she scoffs one evening, mending a tear in her uniform. "The only secret weapon we had was an entire nation of fools willing to believe any lie we were told. Look where it got us." Hannah finds herself somewhere in the middle, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The absence of the expected brutality has left a vacuum in her mind. The American Guards are a constant source of this confusion. They are commanded by a WWII captain, a tall, no-nonsense woman named Peterson, who walks the camp with an air of brisk authority. The male guards on the perimeter are mostly young draftees. They chew gum, read comic books, and complain about the food and the French weather. They flirt awkwardly with the younger prisoners, who either rebuff them with icy glares, or, in some cases, cautiously flirt back, trading smiles for a cigarette or a piece of chocolate. There is no torture, there are no beatings.
Punishment for rule-breaking, hoarding food, fighting, refusing a work detail is swift and impersonal. A stint in the isolation barrack or the loss of privileges. It is all done according to the book, the Geneva Conventions, a set of rules Hannah had been taught was a meaningless scrap of paper to the Allies. The disconnect between her indoctrination and her reality grows wider each day. She was taught that the American is a mongrel, a decadent gangster without culture or discipline. But she sees them writing long letters home, their faces soft with longing. She sees them playing baseball in a muddy field, their laughter echoing across the wire. She hears their music, Glenn Miller, the Andrews Sisters, drifting from the radios in the guard huts, a strange, infectious rhythm that speaks of a world of confidence and ease she cannot comprehend.
One afternoon in the laundry, Hannah slices her hand open on a loose piece of metal inside a washing machine. The cut is deep, bleeding profusely. Ilsa, the medic from her capture, is now working in the camp infirmary. She cleans and stitches the wound with practiced skill. An American doctor, a major with graying hair and kind eyes, inspects the work. He speaks a few words of German. "Good work, Schwester," he says to Ilsa. Then he looks at Hannah. "You will have a scar." Hannah just nods, staring at her bandaged hand. "You are from?" he asks gently. "Dusseldorf," she replies, her voice barely a whisper. The doctor's expression softens. "I have seen pictures. It is bad." He pauses. "My grandparents were from Stuttgart, a long time ago." He gives her a small nod and moves on to the next patient. Hannah is left stunned. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't celebrating the destruction of her home. He spoke of it as a tragedy. He connected himself, however distantly, to the very land he had helped conquer. Later that night, lying on her bunk, Hannah stares at the wooden ceiling of the barrack. The silence is broken only by the snores of the other women and the distant hum of a generator. The guard in the nearest tower is whistling a tune from a popular American song. For the first time, Hannah allows a dangerous question to surface from the depths of her confusion. It is not a question about the guards, or the food, or the war. It is a question about herself. If they, the enemy, are not the monsters she was told they were, then who were the monsters? The question hangs in the dark, silent air of the barrack, unanswered and terrifying. By the autumn of 1945, the war in Europe has been over for months, but for the women in Camp 21, time seems to have stopped. The routine is ingrained, the boredom a physical weight. But a new phase of their captivity is about to begin, one that will prove more psychologically devastating than any physical hardship. The Americans call it denazification. It starts subtly. German-language newspapers, printed by the Allied occupation authorities, begin to appear in the mess hall. They are filled with articles about the ongoing trials at Nuremberg, detailing charges of war crimes against the highest echelons of the Reich, men Hannah and the others had been taught to revere as national heroes. Greta, the party loyalist, snatches one from an unattended table and rips it to shreds. "Lies, all of it," she spits, her face contorted with rage. "Jewish propaganda! They are trying to poison our minds!" Many of the women agree with her, or at least want to. It is easier to believe in a grand conspiracy than to confront the alternative. But Hannah finds herself reading the articles in secret, hiding a folded copy in her mattress. The sheer weight of the testimony, the meticulous legal arguments, the lists of names and dates, it is difficult to dismiss it all as simple lies. It plants a seed of doubt, a cold knot of dread in her stomach. Then come the films. One evening, they are all ordered to assemble in a large recreation hall. A 16mm projector has been set up at one end, a white sheet tacked to the opposite wall. Captain Peterson stands at the front, her expression grim.
Through a German-speaking interpreter, she announces that attendance is mandatory. They are going to be shown newsreels filmed by Allied Signal Corps cameramen from concentration camps that have been liberated across the Reich. A murmur of resentment and defiance runs through the hall. Hannah sits on a hard wooden bench, her hands clenched in her lap. She braces herself for more propaganda, faked scenes, exaggerated claims. The projector whirs to life. The first images are shaky, black and white. A sign comes into focus: Arbeit macht frei. The camera pans across the gates of Auschwitz, then Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, Dachau. The room falls silent. The only sound is the click-clack of the projector. What unfolds on the screen is a vision from the deepest circle of hell. Piles of emaciated human bodies stacked like cordwood. Living skeletons in striped pajamas staring at the camera with hollow, dead eyes. Bulldozers pushing thousands of corpses into mass graves. The camera lingers on the faces of the dead, on the tattooed numbers on their arms. It shows the gas chambers, the crematoria, the warehouses filled with human hair, with piles of shoes, eyeglasses, and children's toys. A woman in the front row vomits. Another begins to sob hysterically. Greta jumps to her feet, shouting, "It's a trick! These are German bodies, victims of Allied bombing!" But her voice lacks conviction. It is the desperate cry of a faith being annihilated before her very eyes. An MP quietly but firmly escorts her out of the hall. Hannah cannot look away. Her eyes are fixed on the screen, her mind refusing, then failing, to find an alternative explanation. She had known about the camps, of course. Everyone had. They were labor camps, places for political dissidents, communists, criminals, and Jews who were enemies of the state. Hard places, to be sure, but necessary for national security. That was the official story. That was the lie. This was not labor. This was extermination on an industrial scale. The newsreel is narrated by a calm, somber American voice, translated live by the interpreter. He presents the facts without emotion, which somehow makes it all the more horrific. He lists the numbers: 6 million Jews, millions more Poles, Soviets, Roma, homosexuals, political prisoners. The film ends. The lights come on. The hall is filled with a deafening silence. The faces of the women are ashen, their eyes wide with a mixture of horror, revulsion, and a dawning, sickening comprehension. The world they knew, the ideology they served, the war they fought, it was all in the service of this unimaginable evil. They file out of the hall in a state of shock, not speaking, not looking at each other. Back in the barrack, the usual evening chatter is absent.
Frau Schmidt sits on her bunk, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Even the most cynical among them are shattered. Hannah lies awake all night, the images seared into her brain. The pile of children's shoes. A skeletal survivor trying to smile. A British soldier, a hardened combat veteran, turning away from a mass grave, his face collapsing in tears. Her entire moral universe has been inverted. She had seen herself as a patriot, defending her homeland from aggressors. Now she sees herself as a cog in a machine of mass murder. Her uniform, once a source of pride, now feels like a shroud. Her service, once an act of duty, now feels like an act of complicity. She thinks of the American doctor who spoke of his grandparents from Stuttgart. He wasn't a barbarian. She thinks of the young GI who looked away from her in embarrassment on the day of her capture. He wasn't a degenerate. They were the ones who had stopped this. The fear of being tortured by the Allies seems like a child's fantasy now, a naive and foolish notion from a lifetime ago. The truth is a far more sophisticated and enduring form of torture. It is a slow, cold poison that seeps into the soul. She gets up and walks to the small grimy window of the barrack, looking out at the moonlit wire. She sees her own reflection in the glass, the face of a stranger, the face of a German in the year 1945. And for the first time, she feels an unbearable, crushing weight. It is the weight of shame. The spring of 1946 arrives, painting the French countryside in shades of vibrant green that feel alien and mocking to the women of Camp 21. The war has been over for a year. The denazification films have been shown multiple times. The initial shock has given way to a landscape of fractured souls. The camp is no longer a place of unified German identity, but a collection of individuals struggling with a monstrous inheritance. Greta, the fanatic, has retreated into a self-imposed silence, a brittle shell of denial. Others, like Frau Schmidt, have embraced a bitter, all-consuming cynicism. But for many, including Hannah, the last year has been a painful and necessary education. The process of relearning the world has been agonizing. It involved accepting that everything they had believed was a lie, and that the enemy had, in many ways, been their liberator. The atmosphere in the camp has changed profoundly. The relationship with the American Guards is no longer defined by the victor-vanquished dynamic. The GIs are mostly new replacements, young men who never saw combat, and they are as eager for the war to be truly over as the prisoners are. A kind of weary familiarity has set in. Hannah has started learning English, trading mended socks with a guard named Sergeant Miller for lessons. He is a boy from Ohio who wants to be a teacher. He gives her a dog-eared copy of The Grapes of Wrath, and she painstakingly translates it, sentence by sentence, with a German-English dictionary provided by the Red Cross. The book is a revelation. It tells a story of poverty, injustice, and dignity within America itself. It shatters the last remnants of the propaganda image of a perfect, decadent paradise. These people, her captors, were just that, people, complicated, flawed, and human. In May, the announcement finally comes. The camp is being decommissioned. The remaining prisoners are to be repatriated to Germany. The news is met not with universal joy, but with a complex wave of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a deep-seated dread. Where are they going? What is left of home? Their families, their houses, their entire country, all of it is either gone or irrevocably changed. They are being released from the relative safety and order of the camp into the chaos of a ruined, occupied nation that now has to confront its own guilt. Hannah spends her last days packing the few possessions she has accumulated: the book from Sergeant Miller, a small bar of soap, a few letters from her aunt in the British zone confirming that her parents' apartment building in Dusseldorf is now a pile of rubble. They are alive, living in a displaced persons camp. On the morning of her release, she stands in line with 24 other women. They are given civilian clothes, ill-fitting dresses and coats supplied by relief agencies, and a set of discharge papers. Her Wehrmacht uniform is taken from her, and she feels a strange pang of loss, not for the regime it represented, but for the girl who once wore it, a girl whose certainty and purpose were now gone forever. Captain Peterson is there, overseeing the process. She stops in front of Hannah, looking at her for a moment. "Vogel, right?" "Yes, Captain." Hannah replies, her English hesitant but clear. Peterson nods. "You worked hard. Good luck." It's not warm, but it is not unkind. It is simply an acknowledgement, a closing of a chapter. Hannah walks towards the main gate, the same gate she entered in a state of terror a year ago. Sergeant Miller is on duty. He offers a small, awkward smile. "Headed home, Hannah?" "I think so," she says. "Thank you, for the book." "You keep it," he says. "Maybe you can teach someone someday." She steps through the gate. The wooden barrier swings shut behind her.
For the first time in over a year, there is no barbed wire between her and the horizon. She is free, but the feeling is not elation. It is a heavy, daunting emptiness. The fear she felt on the day of her capture, the visceral animal fear of torture and death, is gone. It has been replaced by a far more complex and enduring anxiety. The fear of Allied cruelty was a lie she was told by others. The truth of her nation's guilt is a burden she must now carry for herself. She starts walking down the long, poplar-lined road that leads away from the camp. A truck carrying other released prisoners rumbles past, offering her a ride, but she waves it on.
She needs to walk. She needs to feel the solid ground beneath her feet. She is walking not towards a restored life, but towards the rubble of an old one. She must find her parents. She must survive in a country that is just beginning to understand the depth of its own depravity. The future the Führer had promised, 1,000 years of glory, has dissolved into this. A lone woman in a borrowed dress, walking down a country road in a defeated land, with nothing but a painful truth and a difficult freedom. The sun is rising, but it feels like a different kind of dawn, one stripped of all illusions, offering no promises, only the stark, undeniable challenge of beginning again.